Family comes first, but food comes a very close second.
I love it.
It's the joy of growing.
It looks like ringlets, doesn't it?
Cooking.
It's a bit of all right.
And eating it.
Well, it can't be bad if I'm having a second lot.
How are you, my Mary?
I'm getting a bit sort of happy.
And I love meeting the people who share this passion.
Exquisite.
And best of all, there's still so much wonderful food to discover. Gorgeous colour, look at it. It's most exciting. Looking good. So let's get cracking. I think I've almost spent as much time in the garden as I do in my kitchen. But that's a good thing, because I just love cooking all the produce that I've grown.
Whether it's from a windowsill brimming with herbs or a vegetable patch bursting at the seams, I've 4 recipes that will put homegrown produce to good use. The perfect Sicilian dish that will make the most of any green-fingered efforts. A scrumptious casserole that's a symphony of herbs. And a treat that may surprise, my delicious sunshine cake packed with veg from the garden. But I want to begin with something light and wonderfully fresh, a vegetable noodle soup bowl.
If you have an allotment or you love to grow vegetables at home, it's nice to cook them in different ways.
And a soup is one of my favourite ways because it's so simple. Just bring 2 litres of vegetable stock to the boil. Shop bought is fine.
What I really love about this soup bowl is every single thing is in one pot, minimum washing up.
It's such a quick dish to make. Throw in a tablespoon of light muscovado sugar, a tablespoon of dark soy sauce, and 6 sliced spring onions.
About 5 centimetres of ginger. That's quite a lot of ginger. You can add a little bit less if you like, but I love ginger, especially when it's fresh. Then I've got some small red chilli, and look, I really have chopped that very, very finely.
Fresh chilies are fun to grow, even on a windowsill.
I'm being quite careful to see that I don't go anywhere near my eyes or my mouth, because that won't half sting.
Then a tablespoon of sweet chilli and a teaspoon and a half of fragrant 5-spice.
It's mainly star anise and cinnamon, so it's not really potent and hot. It's just full of flavour. Now that's been gently simmering away. That has softened the spring onion, and all the flavours will have blended together.
Now for the finishing touches. 150 grams of shiitake mushrooms and 50 grams of egg noodles.
In go the mushrooms next, like that. And then the noodles without breaking them up. Pop them in there.
The greens are next, starting with pak choy, straight from the garden.
Quick to germinate and quick to grow. Great to have outside in the veg garden or allotment. What's so nice, it gives a bit of bite to the soup. It's the one thing that'll still be a little bit crisp.
To top it all off, a small bunch of fresh coriander.
Oh, it's a lovely smell coming up here. It's funny about coriander because I can remember really loathing coriander, and it grows on you. I love it now. In goes the pak choy.
Finally, the citrus kick from half a lime.
Gosh, it's good, but it needs a little salt and some ground black pepper. Quick stir. Now I'm going to serve it in the bowl. There we go. Bet you wonder what I'm fishing about here. I'm just making quite sure I don't get 3 pieces of chilli. I wouldn't be able to talk to you. It's a lovely surprise. an excellent soup to make from all those things you grow.
Growing food is so rewarding and absolutely anyone can do it. But don't just take my word for it. I think the best kept secret about growing is you don't need masses of space to do it in. I've taken a day trip to Staffordshire to meet passionate gardener Tyra Nisa. She may have a beautiful garden now, but Tyra spent nearly 2 decades growing things in almost no space at all.
I haven't had a garden in 19 years, but I've always wanted to grow my own food.
The only outdoor space Tyra had was her 4th floor balcony, but she made it work.
You can easily grow things on a kitchen windowsill. You know, you can easily grow your herbs or your spices. And I think the first thing that I really grew was potatoes in a pot, which was actually a fish tank somebody was throwing away. Once I harvested them, I had 21 spuds from 1 potato. So even if you have only got 1 potato at home, you can still grow a whole batch more.
A fish tank to grow your spuds? What a jolly good idea. I love anyone who knows how to reuse things.
I like to repurpose a lot of things purely because I don't like waste. I've used trifle bowls, I use them as propagators on top of my plant pots to help things grow. I use pop bottles. I make my own fertilizer at home using comfrey leaves, which is what people usually just consider as weeds, and rip them out. It's extremely nutritious.
Since finally getting her own garden 3 years ago,
Go on, grab your shovel, good boy.
Tyra has continued to build on what she learnt on that balcony.
It was just playtime, grow what you want, do what you want, and it was just the most exciting thing ever.
And it's wonderful to see her sons getting involved.
I think for me, knowing where my food comes from is very important. It's, you know, garden to kitchen to plate, and it's just so simple.
I'm looking forward to meeting Tyra and exchanging some gardening tips.
I'm really excited to meet Mary. I'm going to be like fangirling after her.
You started in such a small way, in window boxes, on the balcony, and here it has all come to fruition.
Almost, yes. We've got squash, onions, potatoes, turnips, kohlrabi.
This is amazing. Everything looks bright green, growing well.
Thank
You've got
you.
tomatoes and spinach and all sorts. You've got vegetables and flowers all together. It's great.
I've tried to go for a cottage garden feel because when I was researching about how to grow, they always say that it's best to grow the flowers and the veggies together to help the pollinators.
Are you self-sufficient in veggies?
I would say a bit of yes and a bit of no. There are many things that we don't actually need to buy anymore because we're able to grow them ourselves now. And we do also make our own compost. So we use kitchen scraps, we use chicken manure, weeds, things like that. They all go into a compost bin.
You do make do and mend. If you don't
do.
go and buy the posh thing, you invent it yourself and turn it and put the lid on.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people feel that maybe they can't do certain things. They have to buy expensive equipment and things like that, and it's really not the case. You can always work with what you've got.
You should be immensely proud. There's plenty of space here for even more planting.
Yes, thank you.
A beautiful day in Tyra's glorious garden was just the inspiration I needed for my next mouth-watering recipe. Aubergine caponata.
Caponata is a Sicilian dish, and the main ingredient are aubergines, and I've got 2 lovely fat ones here.
Traditionally made with green olives, but I'm using black olives as they're my favourite.
I've taken the aubergine and I've cut it into cubes.
Add a healthy slug of olive oil to a large pan and don't hold back because the aubergine will absorb it very quickly. Once the oil is sizzling, throw them in. Keep an eye on them until the aubergines soften and turn a delicious golden brown.
And there it is, ready. I'm going to tip it out now. Total clean pan, doesn't need a wipe round. I'm just going to put a little more oil in the pan and then add the other vegetables.
The joy of this recipe is any leftover vegetables will work. I have 2 large onions.
Then some red pepper.
Celery works brilliantly in the mix. It can be grown at home, in a sunny spot, mind you.
And you want to turn this in the oil for about 3 or 4 minutes. As long as you're standing by it and you're turning it, you can have it on a very high heat.
3 cloves of crushed garlic. Add less if you prefer, but I want it to have punch throughout. Then 100 grams of those delicious olives.
Black pitted olives, the ones that are with olive oil, not brine.
2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar.
Passata, sometimes in a carton, sometimes in a jar, and it goes. Now we've added a little vinegar to the mixture, as you would in caponata, and you have a sort of sweet and sour, and that's why you add a little bit of sugar. Just a heaped teaspoon.
Pop on the lid and let it simmer until the veg are beautifully tender.
That's had 30 minutes. That looks exciting, doesn't it? And gosh, it'll be full of flavour. I think I'd quite like it, just in one dish on a Sunday night with a fried egg on top. I don't think that's very Sicilian, but it's just what I would like. We're all used to ratatouille, but I think this beats it every time.
Fresh herbs can truly elevate any recipe that calls for them. And I love to grow my own. Here's a few ideas to make the most of them.
If you follow this tip, you won't waste chives ever again.
Enjoy fresh chives all the year round by tying a bunch at both ends, wrapping in foil, and freezing them. Just bring them out whenever needed.
Take a pair of scissors and snip off what you want.
Pop what's left back in the freezer for another occasion. A clever way to keep bought herbs fresh is to treat them like you would a bunch of flowers.
Put them in a small jug or pot in the fridge, and if it's more than 2 or 3 days, slip a bag over the top.
This protects the herbs while still allowing them to breathe.
The one herb not to put in the fridge is basil, because it likes warmth and it's Mediterranean.
Finally, a rather delicious way of preserving fresh herbs.
Have softened butter, add chopped herbs and garlic, mix them together, shape into a cylinder, wrap and freeze.
Remove from the freezer whenever needed.
Cut off a slice when you want it, perhaps to put on a jacket potato, on steak.
Or just spread on a crusty baguette. Delicious.
I'm on my way to meet Terry Walton, the allotment legend, and I, for one, can't wait.
Terry has worked this allotment in the Rhondda Valley for almost all his life and is a much-loved gardening expert.
I distinctly remember 4-year-old, and my father had a plot of ground alongside his shed, and he turned that over and he gave me a packet of radish seed, and he said he was, son, plant those, and that got me hooked. Absolutely love it. It's a great place to be. You're with nature, you're out in the fresh air, and it's my total stress counsellor. You don't need to go to the gym. You've got everything you need, and you take home a basket full of fresh fruit and veg. What more can you want out of life?
Terry is certainly speaking my language, and I'm just itching to learn more.
What a perfect day,
Oh, it's
isn't it?
beautiful, isn't it? And the valley looks superb now, doesn't it?
This area was once a mining town, and these glorious Welsh hills were jet black from the deposits. But nature has restored them to a splendour that is simply stunning.
How long have you been coming to this allotment?
Been coming to this allotment 71 years. I took my first allotment at 11, right in the far corner on the mountain there. Furthest from the gate because you were the youngest. So then you moved along as age, and I'm now on plot number 2. And I have no ambition to go on plot 1.
No, I can understand that. That's the way out.
There are a staggering 42 plots, all growing an abundance of fresh produce.
Would you prefer to be on an allotment than have your own private garden?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, coming up here, you can come up, you can find peace and solitude, you can be on your own on the plot, but it's a great sharing community. You never go short of anything. And if the real world was like an allotment community, there wouldn't be a problem in the world.
And are you self-sufficient from what you're growing on the allotment?
Yes, with the freezer, I'm storing things like potatoes and onions. We never buy veg. The other thing you have to teach your palate is to eat what's in season.
It's so exciting to wait for the strawberries and wait for the first new potatoes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can never understood the philosophy of eating strawberries in the winter. A strawberry to me needs to be picked at about midday when it's warm, just turned red, and exquisite.
So this is your allotment. Number 2 in the line, neat rows, absolutely lovely.
This is my 10 perch of paradise. It's my 325 square yards of bliss, and it's all mine. Got a good varied diet. In front of you there's a couple of bits of pak choy, 2 courgettes, 1 marrow, rhubarb. Then you got the runner beans, French beans, sweet peas, and down the bottom, carrots, beetroot, parsnips. If it's in the vegetable catalogue, I grow it.
I'm busy trying to think of something that you haven't got, and I'm failed.
Terry's variety is simply outstanding. This is like a playground for a garden lover like me. Here's another vibrant recipe full of the things we grow at home. My luxurious chicken and herb casserole.
I really enjoy growing my own herbs, and herbs that I've chosen go particularly well with chicken.
Start by frying 250 grams of dry cured bacon. Straight in, no need for oil.
So keep turning that until some of the fat has come out. The smell is just, oh, it's wonderful. It makes me think it's breakfast time, but it's not.
Then in with 2 large onions, roughly chopped. Pop on the lid to draw out the moisture.
Now let me see how this is doing. All the fat has disappeared and it's been used to fry the onion.
When that's done, use the same pan to brown off 8 skinless chicken thighs.
A great favourite of mine. It gets really tender with the cooking. If you overcook a breast, it becomes tougher and tougher.
When both sides are beautifully golden, remove from the pan and set aside. Time to get started on the sauce. Add a little more oil before sprinkling in 30 grams of plain flour.
Work it away, scratching up the sediment. Now I've got some stock here, and I'm going to add a little to begin with. It's easier if it's hot, and it will gradually thicken. Now this is far too thick at the moment, but I'm going to add some wine. About 150 ml, give or take. That's exactly 150 ml.
Simply work the wine into the mix and bring it all to the boil.
So that's bubbling up, it's lovely and thick. So in goes all the chicken, the onion and the bacon. Now you wouldn't expect to have a casserole as thick as that, but just you wait.
What makes this dish come alive are all the beautiful aromatic herbs.
So we've got the sage here, just put that in. Then I've got some thyme.
2 bay leaves and a few parsley stalks.
I'm going to put the lid on.
Pop onto the middle shelf of a preheated oven at 140 fan and cook for about 30 minutes.
Gosh, that herby smell really knocks you back. Absolutely lovely.
To complement those flavours, there's nothing better than some earthy chestnut mushrooms.
You don't put them in any earlier because they would be overcooked.
Gently work in some unctuous full-fat creme fraiche.
Now remember I said to you that the sauce was very thick to begin with. The creme fraiche and the juices of the onion and the chicken have run the sauce down to a nice light consistency.
It will need another 15 or 20 minutes in the oven.
Now we've got this special flavour to go on top, sage.
I'm going to fry the leaves in butter until they're beautifully crisp.
So here it is. Now just listen carefully. Snap.
At last, the casserole is done.
That looks a bit of all right. It looks beautifully rich, doesn't it?
Just fish out the herbs and sprinkle with some chopped parsley and the fried sage leaves for a majestic finish.
The first thing that hits you is a wonderful aroma of herbs. It is a joyous casserole.
My rather special chicken and herb casserole, a dish that will work perfectly with a side of potatoes, never better than when straight from the soil. And Terry's crop looks the business.
Are you happy there, Mary? Is that enough?
Yes, of course I am, and I'll take over from here.
Okay, that's great.
I've just boiled them with a handful of mint leaves, and they're still deliciously warm. This is Terry's garlic patch, and he's given me one to use in my dish.
Take off the root, like that. As I expected, the cloves haven't yet formed, and so it'll be a milder garlic flavour. In fact, that's just what I want. So I'm going to just cut across in a crisscross pattern here.
The garlic goes in along with a rather generous amount of butter.
And then in go the potatoes. I'm not wanting to brown them, I just want to coat them with butter. Add a little bit of pepper and salt. The smell of garlic is just lovely. The potatoes are just done.
Terry's wife, Anthea, has come to join us.
Got the message.
Lucky for me, she's armed with some extra bits.
Hello, Mary.
I'm treating these potatoes with
It's
kids' love.
absolutely delicious.
Good,
I need, you think, some chutney. I got a gooseberry chutney,
right?
and I got you some Welsh ham.
That couldn't be better.
This is shaping up to be a delicious lunch.
Gooseberry chutney, local ham. Let's get going.
Excellent.
That
Delicious.
chutney would win a prize in the village show. Now to the potatoes. They've just got a tinge of brown to them. They're beautifully firm. It is absolutely wonderful. A meal in itself.
I've never tasted produce so good and so fresh, cooked on the spot.
Thank you for a very, very special day.
Thank you, Mary.
Vegetables fresh from the ground really do have an extraordinary flavour. But they don't only have to be for savoury dishes. That's why my final recipe might be a bit of a surprise.
I've called this cake Sunshine Cake, and it really does remind you of summer and sun.
Using vegetables in a cake brings a wonderful moistness to it that can't be matched.
So I'm using courgettes, and I always have a glut of courgettes and don't quite know what to do with them. And carrot, because I've always plenty of those. And you know that banana that always gets left in the fruit bowl? It's perfect for this cake. So the dry ingredients first.
225 grams of self-raising flour.
1 teaspoonful of baking powder.
Now 175 grams of caster sugar.
And now to the wet ingredients.
First the eggs into another large mixing bowl.
So that's the 4 eggs. I always crush those shells down and put them in the compost heap. It makes better compost.
Whisk the eggs just so they run cleanly through the fork.
Sunflower oil, and it goes in. or any flavourless oil.
Oil is important for this kind of cake, so use 225 ml. Then the veg, 100 grams each of the coarsely grated courgette and carrot.
And this is when you can use a banana that's really past its best.
Just make sure it's mashed down well.
You can use all sorts of vegetables in cakes, parsnip, beetroot, pumpkin, but the result is always beautifully moist.
Give it a mix before adding it to the bowl of dry ingredients. Then a good whisk on a slow speed.
Do you know, that looks like a ray of sunshine right now. All you want to do as soon as it's absolutely smooth, stop.
Divide into two 20-centimetre greased and lined cake tins, just as you would for a Victoria sandwich.
So I've set the oven to 160. I need to put them on the same shelf. Now they're going to take about 25 minutes. You'll know when it's done, it'll be level, it'll be a gorgeous golden colour, and when you touch the top, it springs back.
While the cakes bake, it's time to whip up the perfect indulgent icing.
I've got butter first of all, and that wants to be soft but not oily.
100 grams into the bowl, then the same amount of full-fat cream cheese.
What happens if you have low-fat cream cheese? Once you've mixed it all together, it'll run straight off the cake.
225 grams of icing sugar. Finally, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and give it a good mix. Once the sponges have cooked and are cool, I'm ready to decorate.
Half the icing in the middle, slightly more on top. Spread that over right to the edges. Right, now put the other half on top.
For a crunchy topping, some dried banana chips will do nicely.
So there you are. That's my sunshine cake. It's rich, it's creamy, it really is delicious. And who would think that it's a vegetable cake?
Growing and eating your own vegetables, fruit or herbs really is such a delight.
Exquisite.
It doesn't need a vast amount of space,
Much as you can. Good boy.
only a love of bringing things to life and then to the table. Enjoy. Next time,
It's good. Tastes a bit of liquid bonfire.
I'm looking for new flavours
Oh, it's so good. And it's totally different from anything I've ever tasted.
and experimenting with the classics.
Doesn't it look fun? Looking good.